So, this is our second part now in the story of the Bible. This is the second half of Genesis. So, the first half was Genesis 1 through 15. Now we're 16 through 50. So, we just ended off with how Abraham got a promise that God would make him into a great nation, that he would give him land and all these different things, which is Israel, all of the Jews. But Abraham wanted to know, God, how would you promise me? How do I know for sure that all these things will happen? So, God uses a human illustration, a human way of showing Abraham how he will do this. And so, to promise Abraham, to show him that this will happen, God makes a covenant, a chukri, with Abraham. And so, thousands of years ago, the way they would create a chukri, a covenant, is through something called a sacrificial covenant. So what they would do is they'd cut up all these animals and put them into two lines. And then two people that are making a promise would walk in between the dead animals. And basically, what it signifies, what the symbol means, is that when two people walk through these dead animals, it means that if we don't keep this promise, let it be that we are like dead animals. We will be like dead animals if we do not keep this promise. So, God tells Abraham to cut up a bunch of animals, put them in two lines, but instead of Abraham and the Lord walking together making a promise, God makes Abraham fall into a deep sleep, and only God walks through the animals. So what God is doing is he is swearing a promise to Abraham by himself. So that means that whether or not it happens or whether it does happen, it is on God. It is God's responsibility. He takes full responsibility because he already knows Abraham and the Israelites will fail. God walked the covenant path alone. He alone would bear the full responsibility for the covenant. So Abraham wanted to know, God, how can I know for sure that all these things will happen? God puts him to a sleep. God walks through the animals. Basically, God's telling Abraham, you will not be able to complete this promise. Only I can, so trust in me. Not based on man's performance, but only on God's performance. This is the pattern of the entire Bible. I'm going to try some Bangla. Eta shushamachare dhara prakash kore, ishwar proti shruti den, daito nije nen, ebong shesh porjonto poripanatao tini koren, manush noi. So, the gospel and the whole Bible is all about God's responsibility, not man. It is dependent on God, not man. Then after this, a few years later, Abraham, even in his old age, miraculously has a child with his wife Sarah. They have one son, Isaac, their only son. God promises to Isaac also that he will make him into a great nation through Abraham's descendants. But then God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And Abraham's like, Lord, I don't know what to do because I thought you're going to promise me that through Isaac all these things will happen. But Abraham has faith. And so Abraham goes, brings his son to go sacrifice as a korbani. Think like Eid, right? Isaac becomes their korbani. But then his son Isaac asks Abraham, Dad, how will we make the sacrifice? Where's the lamb? And Abraham says, Amar Chele. Ishwar Nijai Purahuti Dan Korer Jono Ekti Mishar Biabosta Korben. And he says to his son, my child, God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And so Abraham did not know that God would provide a lamb, but this is helping us understand what Jesus is. Jesus was our sacrificial lamb. So instead of Isaac dying, right before Abraham was about to kill Isaac, God stops him, and there is a ram in the weeds that he sacrifices instead. And it is to show God's mercy, and also is a test of faith for Abraham. And so Abraham believed God, it's credited to him as righteousness, and God saved Abraham and saved Isaac. And then God promised all the same things to Isaac. He promised Isaac that he would, again, through Abraham, through Isaac, would make him to a great nation and to a great people and bless everyone in the whole world. Shob Jati. And then so Isaac gets married. He grows up. He has Jacob. Jacob grows up, gets married. He has 12 sons, and one of them, Jacob really, really likes. And so he favors that one son, Joseph or Yosef. And so his brothers were jealous that Jacob really liked Joseph. So they sold him into slavery. They caught him and sold him into slavery into Egypt. But through many miracles, even though he was sold into slavery into Egypt, Joseph becomes very powerful and becomes friends with Pharaoh or Pharaoh. And then Joseph has a dream and tells Pharaoh that Egypt will have 7 years of really good crops, of great harvest time, and then 7 years of famine or durbiko. And so they save up for 7 years, and then when the famine hits, only Egypt knows about the famine. Everyone is coming to Egypt for food. And so Joseph's brothers come to Egypt for food, and they totally forget about that it's actually his own brother. And Joseph feeds all of his brothers and saves them. And eventually, Joseph's brothers move down to Egypt, and they start all their families, and they start their people group, their jati. They start living in Egypt. And eventually, Joseph forgave all of his brothers, and the brothers forgave Joseph. And at the very end of Genesis, Joseph says, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." And so this is a story of the Bible about how Satan and evil people do a lot of evil things, but God ultimately works it for their own good. Joseph's brothers did a very evil thing, and because the evil thing that they did, they got saved. It's totally grace. It's only because God is good and not because we are good. And so eventually, the people of Israel, so Israel is all of Jacob's sons, right? So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has all these sons, and they grow into a big nation, and they're living in Egypt. And it's all because of the famine. It's all because of Joseph's dream. But this is where we will leave off for next time. We talk about how they are going into slavery. Egypt sees how big and powerful Joseph and his family is, and how all their descendants, they start to become powerful. They become a huge family, a huge jati, hundreds of thousands of people. And so a Pharaoh who does not know them rises up and sells them into slavery and forces them to work for Egypt. And they're in slavery for 400 years. And way back in Genesis 15, God promises Abraham that his descendants, his generational family, will be sold into slavery for 400 years. So the promise came true. And then we will talk about how God rescues them from that in the Red Sea, but that is coming next. So that is the second half of Genesis.